Thank you. I appreciate that. This is Glenn. I'm your host again, and we're going to get into the Rex Heurmann murder trial. There is a development. I know there wasn't any show for about 3 weeks back there in December, but that's because there was absolutely no developments. But there's a bunch now, and you heard it here first. There was no place else in the world that you heard that handsome Rex, that's what we call him, was on suicide watch. From the very first day they walked him into the police station. Well, he was, but that was only until last week when he made his first court appearance, and the DA made a small comment to that fact, or to the court, that Rex is no longer on suicide watch. So he's with, I think we say, amongst the general population in the jail. And he is not better off there than he would be. I know that when we think of jail, and jail is where we hold people where they haven't gone to trial, or if they've been sentenced to less than a year in incarceration, we hold them in a jail. But the jail is full of, I don't know how to say this, but people very similar to you and I, who just maybe went the wrong way, made a mistake, did something wrong, picked on the wrong people, and are now spending time regretting their life decisions. But they're not made from Mars or something like that. They're people that if you met them, you'd be surprised how similar they are to you. What that means is that there's going to be a lot of people very much like you and I that are going to be warehoused next to Rex Heurmann. And a lot of those people have daughters. And some of them, unfortunately, have daughters that are down on their luck, enslaved to drugs, especially heroin and now fentanyl, and have had to sell themselves, in other words, go into prostitution, in order to feed the voracious habit that they have. Well, there are pigs like Rex Heurmann who takes advantage of those poor women who are down on their luck and hold the money out in front of them and say, if you'll have disgusting sex with me, and then maybe we'll throw my wife in, she's part of it too, is what some of the people are saying. That's not proven, but that is an allegation that's circulating amongst those on the end in this case. He holds the money out. They can't resist it. They need that next shot or snort, or however it is they're absorbing the drugs, and takes advantage of them, and they go home feeling worse than they've ever felt about themselves in their life, hating themselves, hating pigs like Rex Heurmann. And so there are going to be a lot of people inside the jail that say, I would love to see this guy killed. And we're talking about dozens and dozens. So when those people talk at lunchtime out in the yard, the exercise yard, they're not out there today because it's pouring rain, but when they're out there during the good weather doing their exercises, pumping iron in order to get big enough to defend themselves there, they're going to be talking about, boy, there's Rex Heurmann. Would I love to get my hands on him? And it's very likely, I would say over 50%, that he will suffer an attack before his next court date, and there's no reason in the world why it couldn't be a fatal attack. So he's in terrible, terrible risk. His lawyers, I don't know if they've done this yet, but his lawyers should have already applied to the prison board, which controls the jails too, to have him put in protective custody because he would certainly be a target. But if he's still alive by the time his next court date rolls around, which I believe is in April, he's the luckiest man in the world. The only thing he's got going for him is that he's a very big guy, and so a lot of people in there might not want to take him on, because you don't exactly see it amongst most of the photos, but he's a huge guy, and he would be not somebody you'd want to take on in a fight if you were inside a jail where you had no weapons or anything like that, where it was just hand-to-hand combat. He's a big guy. So that's one. What's really boiling under, let's move on to chapter 2 of this dark story. There are names that are popping up, but because there's no proof, there's no any kind of vindication or proof showing who's listed on this list. But there is now a list of police officers who did attend the sex parties that Rex Heurmann seemed to host. One of the things that's interesting is that he has never said, or no one believes he's ever said, "Hi, I'm the host of this party." But he opened the door and let people in and said, "Hey, come on in," even though it was at a rented club. And there would be dozens and dozens of people there. Now, if you were a man, you had to bring a woman with you, okay? So that was the way they kept weirdos out. You had to bring in a person that you were somehow related to, and she had to serve as your sort of sex chaperone at these weirdo parties that they had. Now, one of the allegations that you might have heard elsewhere, but it seems that it's true, is that he took some of the attendees, male and female, and had them first agree to have sex with him. Oh, boy. That's a disgusting thought. And then he said, "Oh, and you know what? And my wife, too." Oh, boy. That's even worse. Well, they're both worse. And he did that at these parties, but he did that with people that were so desperate for money that they did it. And that will come out when we get to trial. The names of the sex workers who participated in these is not a secret, and it is floating around. So we will get that before the trial date. But the names of the police officers that were there, allegedly, why they were there, who they were there with, and who did they shtup, is not released now. It's not something that I can just publish because it's possible it's not true. So we don't want to get sued, do we? No. So hopefully by this time, let's say Valentine's Day, well, we might have some sort of additional information so that we can say, okay, now it is a provable fact that Rex Heurmann catered to the detectives, which he did in his sex parties, so that he could just call them up. "Hi, it's me, Rex Heurmann." That's a pretty good imitation, by the way. And he would call them up. "I'm just wondering what's going on with that case. I read about the Gilgo Beach case. What's going on with that?" And he would call them and get inside tips, and they just thought he was just a wacko. But in fact, of course, he was judging to see how close they were to finding out that he was possibly involved. So isn't that just something? Now, there's been a possible news conference of some sort. We don't know what it is, but coming from the boyfriend of the number 4 victim whose case was just filed, Brainerd Barnes. Now, if you remember, her boyfriend is the one who sadly watched her walk away, fought with her, because she did not want to go. Her alarm was going off saying, this guy is a creep, this big ogre, as she called him. And as he called Rex when he spoke to the police, he said, this guy, she called him an ogre, and he looked like an ogre. So, boy, how do you go through life with that? Well, you just get enough money to where you don't care what you look like, because you can tempt women into doing things that they would never consider doing otherwise. So that's the answer to that. But he watched her walk away to the car that he testified to the police she was getting into, and the police, what an amazing coincidence, found a car that matches that at Rex's brother's house, hidden in the garage. And that's something. Well, that's weird. That's a coincidence. So he watched her walk away, as the great song by the Rippingtons and goes, and she did not come back. She went to the land of no return. So that's what happened there, but he's talking about having some sort of press conference. We'll see if it happens. Somehow, before he actually gets his face on screen, we know Gloria Allred will stick her face in front of his. She always does. I've been told that she's not as universally despised back east as she is out here west, but she just is somebody who, boy, we've heard enough of her. And if you notice in the Epstein case, she has managed to find some poor victims who need her like a hole in the head, but she just goes on and gets her face in front of them. It's pitiful to watch. When they're talking into the microphone about how bad it was and what Epstein did to them, their lawyer Gloria Allred is standing right next to them and fighting to get her face in front of theirs. And it's so embarrassing. Please, it made me ashamed to have been, and no longer am, a lawyer. So nothing you hear today is legal advice. You shouldn't take it as a proven fact. It is not a fact. They're just mostly and almost entirely allegations that are swirling around this case. And you cannot take any of them as a proven fact. Before you do that, wait for the case to come to court. And remember that not everybody is presumed innocent. That is not true. That's true for the jury, but not for us. Now, here's a little note. We are going to be working on, it's not ready yet, a podcast that should blow the doors open of all of the newsrooms. What is it? Well, some people will say, that's an old case, we don't care. But what it is that we have found the first Hillside Strangler victim. And it's not who the TV tells you was the first victim. We all know that the first victim they found in the plants by the freeway, and that's where they found the next 5 or 6 victims, and we know that it led to the arrest of Kenneth Bianchi and his cousin Angela Buono as the killers of these women. But it turns out the police missed the first one. And of course, that would only make sense. They'd never heard of the Hillside Stranglers, and they'd never seen a case like it. So when they found the first one, they just assumed this poor woman, whose name was Bonnie, had been hitchhiking, which she had, and had been thrown into the bushes after she had been thoroughly beaten to a pulp and killed. Well, they didn't realize that she was the first in a series of murders that would be done by Buono and Bianchi. And we'll go over the evidence that she was part of it, that she was unfortunately just their practice training ground, and how they went forward and went on to become just notorious and scary among the people that resided in Los Angeles at that time, which I did, and just how sad it is that this poor woman has gone to her death and absolutely no one except some of her friends and her parents, who unfortunately both, I believe, are deceased, but nobody realized at that time that she was, unfortunately, I've said that too many times now, that she was a victim of Bianchi and Buono. Now, wouldn't you know what would be interesting? Holy cow. This just comes to me as I'm talking to you. I wonder if the police got a hold of this information, could they overturn the life in prison sentences that Bianchi and Kenneth Buono have and actually get a death sentence following a conviction, of course. What if they may not be convicted, it may not be them. So, but let's suppose that we start digging the evidence out, and by we, I mean really the police, then that will greatly enhance the scope of what we know about the first Hillside Strangler murder, and we may find out that, that it was them, okay? And if that is not included, boy, think about that. If that was not included in the plea agreement, which I believe the plea agreement was done in Washington, where they caught Bianchi inches away from murdering another woman. What if we could get a new case down here, unrelated to any of the others, and get a plea from him to first-degree murder of this woman, Bonnie? Well, maybe we could get a death penalty. That would be exciting. Wouldn't that be exciting? Yes, it would. And that's going to be it for today. So please, so that it helps me get up in the algorithms, you know where that is. Hit the like button, subscribe, and hit that bell that says remind you when a new episode comes out. When's a new episode going to come out? Not Monday. This is Monday's episode, but it's not Monday. I know it's Saturday, but I wanted to let you know about the development that Rex is now off of Death Watch, and he's no longer on it. I don't have any information about how or why they made this determination. And I have heard stories in the past where it's done for evil purposes. I don't have any reason to believe that here. I have no information anyway on it. But yes, I have heard of other cases that the prison guards, etc., that are in on the decision just say, this guy is such a friggin' piece of work. Let's just put him in with the general population and see how long he survives, which I don't think would be long at all. There's just too many fathers in there with daughters in there that are going to say, I don't want this guy ever getting out. And with that, we'll see you next Monday. And I promise we do have an interesting development that I can't go into here, but it does have to do with naming the police officers that were in on some of these sex parties. And we'll start naming names next week.